What's up, you guys? My name is Mr. Stefan, and you are watching Keeping Up with Mr. Stefan. Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm taking the dis out of disability in a whole new way. I'm gonna give you my tips for how to host inclusive holiday events. Tip number 1, you need to be open-minded. People with disabilities have been cast aside, hidden, and ignored for so long that most people don't understand them anymore. It doesn't feel normal to see someone with autism or Down syndrome walking next to you at Walmart, much less at a holiday party. But if you are in charge of planning any party during the winter season, then I assume that you are a seasoned host, which means that you have the power to lead your guests into a bigger, better, more inclusive future. But in order to do that, you need to start with an open mind, because including people with disabilities on your guest list, whether that means inviting your friend's son who happens to have an intellectual disability, or including students with disabilities in your school-wide holiday party, means that you are going to have to do things a little bit differently, and you're going to have to expect the unexpected. Tip number 2, educate yourself. Depending on your situation, you can make this really personalized or super general. But you should know a little bit about disability if you are planning an inclusive event. Now, if you're planning for one person, like your friend's son with an intellectual disability, then you could easily ask your friend to tell you more about his or her son. What is he like? What are some of his challenges? Is there anything that you can prepare beforehand that might help him to feel comfortable and safe? But if you're planning for a bigger group, i.e. the students with disabilities on the school campus, you can't possibly plan for every student's individual needs. But what you can do is ask their case managers for tips and input, and you should also do some research on your own and brush up on your knowledge of disability. There's so much on the internet, and a lot of it is intense and ugly to look at. So I suggest Googling simple phrases like, what is intellectual disability, Down syndrome symptoms, strategies for autism, etc., etc., etc. This will give you super quick and easy information that you could even copy and paste into your event plans. Tip number 3, share the knowledge. This can happen in a variety of ways depending on your situation. In some cases, you might want to have a pre-meeting with some of your guests and teach them what you've learned about disability so that they feel prepared to support you in being more inclusive. But that is not always possible or appropriate. You may just decide to have your guests show up and expect that they'll all be inclusive without prompting. But even in this scenario, you should be prepared for questions such as, what the heck is this kid doing? What's wrong with him? Oh my God, did you see that weirdo? And you, as the host of an inclusive extravaganza, should be prepared with a quick and easy spiel that will shut down any haters and help people to understand some of what you have already learned in your research. It could be something as simple as this. Oh, that's Mr. Stefan. He has some learning differences, but he is just as cool as any of my other guests. I'm so happy to have him here. You should really go say hi to him. Tip number 4, anticipate the needs of all of your guests. Any good host knows that rule numero uno is to accommodate all guests. This is especially true in the winter holidays. And we already know what they want. Good food, and lots of it. Good drinks, or any drinks, really, and lots of it. And depending on your group, there may be a whole list of preferences and expectations. But we do not typically take into account the needs of people with disabilities. If your event is not accessible to people with disabilities, they won't show up, or they won't stay long. In other words, you are excluding an entire population of awesome people. Here are some of my suggestions for easy blanket accommodations that you can plan for that will make your event so much more inclusive. Create a visual agenda so that guests can see what's going on from start to finish, and they can prepare themselves for each of the events. Have noise-canceling ear gear on hand for anyone who can't handle loud music. Designate a small, calm space for anyone who might need to step away from the crowds and chaos for a few minutes. Incorporate a variety of activities like dancing, karaoke, art, music, contests, games, etc. so that there's a little bit of something for everybody. Tip number 5, plan structured social activities. Some of your guests may be fine mingling and chatting around the room, but people with disabilities often struggle in social situations. Creating structured social activities like games, team activities, or pair activities, speed dating conversations without the dating. Any of the activities that I mentioned in tip number 4, or really anything to get people talking to each other, will provide built-in support so that anyone who's not super social doesn't feel excluded, awkward, or alone at the party. That is literally my worst nightmare. Tip number 6, do not expect perfection. This should be true regardless of how inclusive your party is. But when it comes to inclusion, we need to remember that this is new for so many people. And it might be new for you too. So things could happen that may feel wrong, or weird, or silly, or off. But you need to model acceptance, understanding, and a calm demeanor for your guests. Because it's true. Some disabilities impact a person's impulse control, their behaviors, their ability to cope with change, fear, anxiety, etc., etc., etc. And they might do things that we aren't used to seeing. So what do you do if you have a guest with autism who becomes overstimulated and flips the table? First of all, this is an extreme and highly unlikely situation, just so you know. But if it were to happen,
the worst thing you could do
would be to freak out, get mad, kick them out, etc. Because then you are sending the message to all of your guests. If you aren't like us, then you can't be here. People who are different don't belong in public. If you can't hide your disability, then you need to leave. Also, if this is a son or daughter of a friend or a loved one, then you're sending them a similar message. You can't control your child? Don't come to my parties. Which is as far away from inclusion as you can get. We need to change the way that we perceive and understand disability. Weird, different, uncomfortable behaviors are the hardest thing for most of us to understand. But many times it is not something that can be cured or controlled. At least not in the way that we see with people who are typically developing. Obviously, you won't be happy about the flipped table, especially if there's a mess on the ground or expensive items that were broken. But life happens, and life goes on. Hakuna Matata. Try to talk to the person if they're alone. Ask them what's wrong. What do they need? Let them know that they can go to the calm space if they need to chillax. If they're there with a parent or a chaperone, let that person know that you're okay, that they're welcome to de-escalate and rejoin the party. And most importantly, let them know that they should not feel guilty or embarrassed about what happened. Show your guests that you understand. Some of them will judge you and say things behind your back, like, they're just gonna let him do that. Aren't they gonna kick him out? There should be bigger consequences for something like this. Trust me, as a special education teacher, people say these things about me pretty much every single day of my life. But I just ignore them because they don't understand. But there will also be guests who see what you do and they'll think,
wow,
I would have never thought to handle the situation that way. And you just might inspire them to be more inclusive in their own everyday lives. As a party host, you're a leader, and leaders have the power to change the future. So go on with your bad self. Throw the most inclusive holiday party that anybody has ever seen. Oh yeah.